Good Morning Liberty.
Well, what is up, all of our liberty-loving friends? This is another fantastic episode of Good Morning Liberty. My name is Nate Thurston, and I'm by myself today, just hanging out here with the Fed Haters Club. Join GML.com. We're talking about some ideas, running some ideas back and forth for this video series. I'm trying to get going, doing a bunch of research for it right now. So anyhow, it's just me. Charlie's not here. He is somewhere in the Gulf of America right now, having fun. And I'm here having way more fun than him, recording a podcast episode and hanging out with the Fed Haters Club. Got a couple main things to talk about today. First thing is the ruling on Trump's tariffs and what effect that is going to have, if that's even going to hold or go through. We're going to talk about that. Maybe we'll talk about the potential that the administration's considering declaring a housing emergency. So we'll talk about that. We're also online. If you hang out online all the time on X like I do, people are concerned with Trump's health right now. I wouldn't say they're concerned. They're talking about whether or not Trump is alive or he's got some kind of major health issues. He has been sort of out of the spotlight now for several days. There were some pictures posted that it seems like they were old pictures that were posted. There were some Truth Social posts that I agree did not sound like he wrote them, which most politicians don't write every single post. So just want to mention that. Hope everything's okay, and I'm very glad to see that people on the left are very concerned about whether or not the president is in good health, because they're holding true to their principles. They've always been very, very concerned about whether or not the president is in good health, of course. And then the other thing that we're going to do at the end of the show is going to be going through this clip from Jubilee, a show called Surrounded, I believe, where Patrick Bet-David took on 20 anti-capitalists, and I'm going to be playing a specific clip regarding incentives and giving you my response to that. So before we get to all that, I wanted to tell you, I forgot to mention this last week. A couple weeks ago, I recorded an episode on New Guy Josh's podcast, Marten's Minute. So go find Marten's Minute. I recorded that episode with him, interviewed with him, and I talked about music, and I talked about the fact that I was a alcoholic there for a bit. I'll just go ahead and say that. Drank way too much, had a big problem with alcohol, and then I didn't anymore. And we talked about how I got out of that, how I got into it, and specific details about my career in music, and then how I made it out of that and have been sober now for over 7 years. So if you want to find that episode, it's called, give me a second, I don't really remember what the episode's called. Find Your Healthy Obsession, Make It Your Passion. So that's me talking about how I got out of being an alcoholic. And the podcast, once again, is called Marten's Minute. And you can find that on all your podcast apps. And I will do my best to make sure I put a link to that in the show notes as well. So go listen to that. I believe it's the most recent episode. Okay, let's go through some of the stuff. We'll talk about tariffs. So before we go into some of this ruling and all that, I guess I would just pose the question. Some people might agree, some people might disagree. We'll do it on two levels. First off, at the Founding Fathers level, and people on the right like to talk about the Founding Fathers a lot. They weren't perfect or anything, but we care about the fact that they created this country. I think they had some pretty good ideas. Do you think they would have intended for the president to be able to set any tariff rate, which is a tax on imports, a tax on the importing entities, that is a tax on people in America, any tariff rate on goods coming from any country for any reason and any amount of time? Would you think that they would have supported the president having the authority to do such a thing? A lot of times what people would respond with is say, well, one of the first things Congress did after the creation of America was pass the Tariff Act of 1789, I think. And I would say, yeah, they passed the Tariff Act, meaning that it went through Congress and it was a specific tariff rate on specific goods. And it did go through Congress. And they were okay with tariffs as a way to raise revenue over other ways, but they passed it through Congress. The people's representatives voted and they did that. And so the question once again would be, did they support the president instituting any tariff rate that they wanted for any amount of time on any countries and any goods coming from those countries? I would say the answer is obviously not. I think you guys know where I was going with that. I also don't know if in the IEEPA, which was passed in the 70s, maybe that's 1977, if they intended for the president to be able to institute any tariff rate that he wanted to institute on any country and any goods for any amount of time that they wanted to institute. I would say not. And that is the question in the current court case, and whether or not the tariffs that Trump has instituted are legal or illegal. So I'm going to start here with the Washington Post ruling on Trump's tariffs as a major setback for the White House. We're going to do a little bit. Some of this is going to be from the Washington Post. Some of it's going to be from Reason and maybe a couple other things. We'll see. Federal Appeals Court late Friday held that Trump does not have the authority to use emergency economic powers to impose taxes on imports, finding that the power lies squarely with Congress or within existing frameworks to investigate trade imbalances. Now, first off, what's important there is that essentially to do this, Trump had to use emergency authorities, emergency powers. And it would be difficult to say that coming into Trump's administration, that there existed an economic emergency based on trade. I would say you're closer to an economic emergency based on the national debt or the national deficit. They could declare an emergency and cut spending for that. I would love to see that. That'd be awesome. But an emergency on trade because we have trade deficits, something that has been common throughout our history and common throughout times when America was doing the best it's ever done. And by many measures, America's, the people are doing the best that they've ever done, even though you see many stories and doesn't exactly feel like that with inflation and all of that. So were we in an emergency to even justify Trump's use of emergency powers to institute these tariffs? I think there's a big question of whether or not we were in an emergency. The tariffs, he has said, would offset the cost of his one big, beautiful bill, the massive tax and immigration package that congressional bookkeepers say will add $4.1 trillion to the national debt over the next decade. The CBO, the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, which Trump and Republicans attacked for its estimate of the cost of the new law, later projected that the president's tariffs would nearly pay for the whole measure through new revenue. And that is something that we didn't cover last week. I did see the story, but I did go to the CBO's release. They say, I'm sorry, this kind of boring. I just want to back up what the Washington Post just said and maybe back up some of what Trump's arguments have been on the big, beautiful bill and tariffs. The CBO says, as of August 19th, we estimate that the effective tariff rate for goods imported in the United States has increased by about 18 percentage points when measured against 2024. We project that the increases in tariffs implemented during the period from January 2025 to August will decrease primary deficits. Let's see, which exclude all this, by $3.3 trillion if the higher tariffs persist for the 2025 to 2035 period. By reducing the need for federal borrowing, those tariff collections will also reduce federal outlays for interest by an additional $0.7 trillion. As a result, the changes in tariffs will reduce the total deficits by $4 trillion altogether. It's $4 trillion. And they said that the One Big Beautiful Bill Act added $4.1 trillion to the deficit. Of course, all of this is over 10 years. And what do we know about 10-year figures? Nothing stays constant for 10 years, especially as it relates to spending by the federal government. So 10-year projections, I don't know, especially with the tariffs as well. I mean, people on the left have been so against this, so I assume if they take power, they're going to get rid of these tariffs anyway. But anyhow, the CBO, who said that the big, beautiful bill added $4.1 trillion to the deficit, is now also saying that there is an additional $4 trillion in deficit reduction through these tariffs that were not accounted for at the time they were scoring the big, beautiful bill. Are they going to be correct? I don't know. There's a first time for everything. Trump used the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977 to impose tariffs on goods from dozens of nations, from the U.S.'s largest trading partners to uninhabited Arctic islands, Antarctic islands. That law allows the president leeway to respond to national economic emergencies. The appeals court did not take up the question of whether trade deficits are an emergency or the policy rationale for issuing the tariffs, but rather found that the law did not grant the president the power to unilaterally impose permanent new taxes. What we do know right now is that the tariffs are still in effect, and I believe they've given until October. And so we'll see whether or not the Supreme Court is going to take this up and whether or not they're going to rule on it. I believe if they were to rule simply based on the facts and the intentions of the IEEPA, the intentions of the founding fathers who wrote the Constitution, what the constitutional basis is for who can collect taxes, that they would rule that the president does not have the authority to do this. I guess my question would be if why Trump has not gone to Congress, and maybe he will soon, why he has not gone to Congress to either get more power to be able to do this. I'm not suggesting that he should or that that would be a good thing overall. Why has he not gone to Congress and asked them to either give him the power to do this or to pass some type of tariff law? These are arguments that people like Thomas Massie and Rand Paul have been making, and of course they've been attacked heavily for doing so, that this is not legal, what Trump is doing, and that this needs to go through Congress. And in fact, that first Tariff Act of 1789, that was an act passed by Congress. That was not just the president doing a thing to specific countries. And so I think, as freedom-loving Americans and as people who look into the future and we consider the fact that it's not always going to be a Republican president, and even if you don't like Republicans typically or whatever, if you might not even like Trump, you don't know who the next person in charge is going to be. We never know who the next person in charge is going to be. Right now, I think the front runners are between J.D. Vance or Gavin Newsom. By the time we actually get to 2028, it could be anyone. It could be someone we're not even talking about right now. You got to ask yourself, do you trust the rationale behind why Gavin Newsom would be using this power? Or if you like the tariffs and you'd like to keep your tariffs, well, do you like that Gavin Newsom could get in there and just take away all the tariffs? Wouldn't it be better if it were a law passed by Congress? So someone like Gavin Newsom, who wants to help his buddies over in China, doesn't just get in there and take away those tariffs. And so people on the right who support these tariffs should be pushing for Congress to pass a law. And we've seen Trump push Congress very hard to do specific things, like the big, beautiful bill that caused the massive Trump-Musk breakup and everything. We've seen him push really hard to get them to pass things. And it's odd to me that he hasn't pushed hard for them to pass something like this. And like I said, if you want them to be more permanent, you should be asking for Congress to do it. And then we'll see what the people's representatives actually want to do. I think the clear answer to the question of whether or not the founders or the Constitution intended for the president to have this much power is no. And I think also the clear answer whether or not the IEEPA bestows this power to the president is also no. And then I also believe that we're not in an economic emergency due to anything regarding trade right now at all. So I want to go through a couple of the posts here. Trump posted out on Truth. Without tariffs and all of the trillions of dollars we have already taken in, our country would be completely destroyed and our military power would be instantly obliterated. It seems a little bit hyperbolic considering last year we didn't have these tariffs and whatever trillions of dollars in expected deals or expected investments we're supposed to have from other countries didn't exist. And we still had a military seemed like we were still spending a bunch of money on the military, and our military is still probably the most powerful in the world. And so, yeah, it seems a little bit hyperbolic that like without this thing that we instituted on April 2nd of 2025, our military power and our country would be completely destroyed. I don't know. In a 7-4 opinion, a radical left group of judges didn't care, but one Democrat, Obama appointed, actually voted to save our country. I would like to thank him for his courage. He loves and respects the USA. Now that 7-4 opinion where he says that these judges didn't care, I did want to also point out that it's not on to the judges to determine whether or not they think the situation with the country or the situation in the world has led us to a point where we need to have all these tariffs and that they should support Trump's decision to do all those. That's not for them to decide. What they're trying to decide is, does the president have the legal authority to do such a thing? And I think they're going to decide that he does not, but that's what they should decide. You don't want judges to be legislating from the bench, and you don't want them to be giving their opinions on how they think the economic situation is in the U.S., and then they give you a ruling on whether or not the president should be able to do something. It's about whether or not that president has the authority to do that. You would want that in the future if it were a president that you disagree with more often than you might disagree with Trump. He posts out another one. More than $15 trillion will be invested in the USA, a record. Much of this investment is because of tariffs. If a radical left court, now what he means by that is that he's gone to countries and he's made these threats to have these tariffs, and as one of the things they're trying to do, because they can't force all of the people or all of the business owners to buy things from America, is they're saying, well, we're going to be making these investments, and so we're going to invest in the United States. And that's kind of a way of them trying to buy off lower tariff rates, like kind of extorting those other countries. And that's on the people in those countries to worry about, honestly. If a radical left court is allowed to terminate these tariffs, almost all of this investment and much more will be immediately canceled. In many ways, we would become a third world nation with no hope of greatness again. Time is of the essence, President DJT. He's really laying it all on the table here. Like, if they rule in the way that probably, if you're listening, you agree they should rule, does the president have the authority to do this? Are we in an economic emergency that justifies using these emergency powers? And do those emergency powers even give the president the authority to do the things he's been doing? If they rule the way that they probably should rule and probably will rule, then we're going to become a third world nation. There's no other way out of it. The only way that we could do this is by taxing imports that come into the country. I would like to make the argument that there are other ways to prevent America from becoming a third world nation. Our government could stop taxing and spending more money. They could stop borrowing so much money and printing so much money. They could decrease the amount that they spend overall to well below what they take in taxes. That would be good. And then they could stop doing all the things that they do to make everything more expensive for everyone. The list is plenty. And this is episode 1619 or something. I don't know what the episode number is. And we've talked about many of these things plenty of times. All the things the government does to make business more expensive, to make labor more expensive, the protection of unions that then make labor more expensive, which makes items more expensive, and all the regulations that they put on those businesses. Why is it cheaper to go to another country and then pay thousands of dollars per container, all these things over here? It's not just because of the cheaper labor costs. It's also because you can get businesses up and running and moving and producing a lot faster in those other countries. And time is of the essence when you're trying to make this money, especially when you're fighting against the government's inflation every single year. So, yeah, I would say there's other ways that we could prevent America from becoming a third world nation. And one of those things would be moving toward the free market, not just a protection racket for businesses. Yeah, that would be my suggestion. If you're on the right, if you disagree with this ruling, if you agree with Trump on this, why don't we try the other stuff? Why don't we do that? Like ways that, one of the things, I'm not going to go super deep into it, but one of the things that got mentioned over the weekend was that the Trump administration is considering declaring an emergency on housing. Housing's too expensive. We know that in relation to the median income and all that. We spent some time, 2 or 3 weeks ago, going through all of that. So this from the Daily Wire: Trump may declare national housing emergency. Donald Trump's administration plans new measures to tackle the high cost of housing in the coming weeks. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent told Reuters. Emphasizing the urgency of the situation, Bessent described it as an all-hands-on-deck challenge. Bessent told the Washington Examiner in a separate interview that Trump may declare a national housing emergency this fall to address rising prices and dwindling supply. So one of the things that they could do, actually a couple of the things that they could do if they declare a housing emergency, the reason I'm tying this into the tariff conversation is that they could axe a lot of federal regulations that slow down the building of housing. And so in one case, we declared an emergency and then we added a bunch of taxes to try and fix our trade imbalance, where we could have declared an emergency, and I'm not much for emergency powers. We could have declared an emergency to reduce a bunch of regulations and do things that make it easier and cheaper for businesses to form in the U.S., to operate in the U.S., and then use that emergency to get rid of some of the powers that the government has in order to fix trade imbalances, which a lot of that has to do with the cost to do business in the United States. That's one of the things that we could have done. When it comes to housing, one of the things that they're looking at doing, because I've heard them talk about this before, is getting rid of a bunch of the housing regulations, especially environmental regulations that slow down the building of housing. Now, there's going to be other things that they might try to do as well, like using the Defense Production Act to direct things like lumber and whatever housing, building materials, resources towards that, prioritizing those. And I never agree with really uses of the Defense Production Act, so I wouldn't be in support of those. I just found it interesting. One emergency created by the government, if it is an emergency, we're going to just tax to try to fix that imbalance. The other emergency created by the government, we might actually look at decreasing the government's power, the government regulations, to make it easier for a market to operate. We'll wait and see. There's not much I can talk on the housing thing because they haven't announced what they're going to do. And so I can't tell you specifically what they're going to do or give you my opinions on that. So I think I'll get to the last part. I've got a 7-minute video to play, and I'll try to let it play for a bit before I interrupt. So this 7-minute video I'm going to let play is from a YouTube channel called Jubilee, from a show called Surrounded. And it's that thing where you got 2 people sitting at a table and then 20 people surrounding them, and they have a specific time limit, and they can, make a claim, and then people come up and debate that for a couple minutes, and then someone else comes up and debates it, and they've got I can't stand debates. I really hate. As soon as I started listening to this last night, my heart rate went up, my blood pressure went up. I could feel it. I felt tense. I just don't like listening to debates. Hopefully you guys do. But the claim here is that incentive is the engine of capitalism. Remove it and the system fails. So this is Patrick Bet-David debating 20 anti-capitalists. And I might do another clip from this tomorrow. We'll see. I'm only about a third of the way through the episode so far. But in this one, they're talking about incentive. And the idea that some of these people are going to have, there's 2 different people in this clip. The idea they're going to have is that the profit motivator, that's not the real incentive. The people without a profit motive would be incentivized by the common good, and they'd be incentivized by the things that they're passionate about. And we'll go through we'll talk about some of the things they say maybe on the back half. Patrick Bet-David, I would say, does a good job. He's a good debater, Many of the tactics I don't really agree with because I don't think they work in actually changing someone's opinion. I'm no longer the person who says, well, why don't you just move to North Korea? Or why don't you just move to Venezuela? I don't really do that because everyone has decided there's an out when making those claims. They'll say that's not real socialism. That's not real communism. You can point to the leaders who are dictators of those countries, and you can scapegoat any of their economic policies and say that it's actually that leader who is doing bad things. We just need better leaders, or we need no leaders if there's like a true communist up there. And so you don't really get anywhere in the debate because you give them this obvious out, you know. And so he does that a lot, and that's one thing I don't particularly like. But he does a good job on some of this stuff. We're gonna listen to some of it. Let me get this playing. Switch it over here, and I'll see how the volume is.
So I think incentives are exactly the fundamental problem with capitalism. Is that you say incentives are what make it work, and I think that's the whole issue, is that the primary incentives are either greed, amass as much personal wealth as you possibly can.
You think that's the problem? It's greed?
Yeah, exactly. And
like you're not greedy at all.
And like you said, survival.
Yeah.
Right? So the person, you know, working 5 jobs, you know, that they're doing that just so they wouldn't want to do that if they didn't need to survive. But that's such a horrible dystopian world to live in. If someone has to work 5 jobs just to survive.
How did they get there? How much of that is on their decision making? How much of that is on their doing? How much of that is on the market where they're not finding ways to improve themselves?
It doesn't matter how much onus is on the individual. We want to create a world.
Of course it is.
No. See, we want to create a world in which people don't have to earn their right to exist, to live.
We live in a country where majority of the world wants to come here. The amount of benefits America offers against other countries, it's so much higher, where somebody with big dreams, incentives, they're willing to come and say, I want to come to America, please let me in. And some come and take advantage of it. But to say the individual that's working 3 to 5 jobs, if you do that for a season, if you do that for 2 years, if you do that for 5 years, fine. If you do that for 20, 30 years, you're doing something wrong.
But the point is, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? Those are the inalienable rights. We shouldn't have to earn those rights. We shouldn't have to earn the right to health care, to earn the right. No, because we just want to live, exist. We can't work.
So on this, I have to make a point that you've probably heard us made before. You have to earn the right to live. You know, that whole idea. My question is going to be, and I'm going to have it for the next person as well, like, how do you get all the things that you need to survive? Like, if you shouldn't have to work for those, why should the other people have to work to provide you with those things that you need? See, that people have to work to build you a house, or they have to work to grow you food or to pick food. They have to work to become a doctor or to become a nurse, or they have to work to produce medications or medical supplies. They have to work to build roads. All those things take manual labor, some kind of labor for people to make. And if you shouldn't have to work to get those things from those people who have to work to provide you with those things, why should those people have to work to provide you with those things? Why would they work? They don't have to. They should be provided with those things, right? And no one ever, I've never heard anyone ask someone that question. It's the question that I would really like someone to ask, and I would like to hear answered, is why do you have a right to the labor of other people? And why would those people labor if they also have a right to the labor of other people? I guess for the common good. I guess that's their incentive. I don't know. Well, let's go a little bit further here.
Our blood, sweat, and tears just to survive. That's a horrible dystopian world that we live in right now.
No, then what do you think we're here for? To just sit around and play video games?
What do you
think we're here for? To sit around and watch TV shows?
We're here to
sit and watch cat videos?
We are here to create a prosperous community, to lift everyone up.
How do you create a prosperous community? How do you create a prosperous community? Have you created jobs for others?
Created jobs? No, I wouldn't say so.
Why have you not?
I haven't had the ability to do so.
Do you think it's easy or do you think it's hard?
To create jobs is probably hard, yeah.
Okay, so the people that create jobs, you think they should have a little bit of incentive for having risked their life savings, spend time away their families to create jobs so somebody like you can work for that company?
Sure, but that
is
not,
the incentive.
And bravo for them, but that does not give them the right to pay themselves $2 million bonuses while their workers are scraping by at like $10 an hour.
You don't get to choose how much money I choose to make. That's not your business. That's my business.
In my view.
Hey, appreciate you.
Absolutely.
How are you? What's your name?
Zena.
Zena.
And I guess I'll cut in here one more time for the last guy. Absolutely, it should be an incentive for people that it's very hard to create jobs. Like, I don't know if any of you guys have ever tried to do it before. It's very difficult to get to that point. I've done it before when I was flipping houses. And by the way, when I talk about flipping houses, I have to make sure I clarify to people that I did not buy and sell the house. I owned a company that did the work on the houses. And so, like, I flipped the house, but I didn't buy and sell it. So when I say something like, I have flipped over 200 houses, you might be like, oh, look at Nate. He must be a multi-millionaire. No, we were getting paid what you would pay a company to come in and do all of the work in a house. When I first started doing that, it was just myself and the person I started that business with. And it was very difficult to eventually be making enough money that we could hire one person. And so we went through several rounds of hiring one person to come in and do work with us, and kept getting robbed over and over again. Eventually we got robbed really bad. Like, one guy took like all of our tools and everything that we had. And because of our lax hiring and practices, we were not able to pursue legal recourse on the person. So, and then eventually I made it to a point where we were doing 7 or 8 houses at one time, and there's enough money coming in from that we had a max of about 25 people working for us at one time. And at that time, I was still working 18 hours a day. We had a work van. We go up to the house. We work on the house. Didn't want to sleep in the house because that'd be unprofessional. But then a couple times slept in the van in the driveway, and then went back out and started back at 6 a.m. in the morning. And that was at a time when we had 25 employees, and we were not able to sustain that. And then other stuff happened, life happened, whatever, and I'm not doing that anymore. It's very, very difficult to get to that point that you can have enough extra money to hire people. And there should absolutely be an incentive for you to make whatever amount of money you think you need to make to justify the amount of work and the amount of risk that you have to take to start that business, and to hire those people and to pay those people, and to not be making that money that you could be making in order to grow that business. And anyone who says that they're going to put a cap on what you could make, or that this amount of money is too much for what you could make, you're shutting down that process. You are turning off the incentive. So how do you do good for your community? Well, you can create jobs in your community. You can give people a way to earn money. And you take away that incentive when you decide that people can't make whatever profit they need to make off of these businesses. I've been there before, and I can tell you, if there was some kind of cap on the amount of money that people are going to say I could make, I wouldn't have done it. I just would have done way less work. I would not have been working 18 hours a day to try and flip these houses. I just would have done enough to be able to survive and have a decent life, which I could have done working 8 hours a day. I was trying to do something more. Anyhow, let's go to the next girl who went to USC. You can tell, I think she was a sociology major. I'm telling you that because I cut a little bit of that part out. And so she's talking a lot about psychology and everything, but she makes some important claims as well.
Awesome. So this claim about incentive is one that we see often promoted by capitalism enjoyers, right? Mm-hmm. And it's this idea that, profit incentives is the only thing that can make humans do things, get up out of bed every day, which has never been the case. Historically, it's not the case. Psychologically.
Historically, it's never been the case?
No.
What has been the case?
So we've seen...
What's been the incentive?
The incentive is intrinsic motivation.
Intrinsic motivation?
Of course. Have you ever heard of intrinsic motivation?
Of course I have. So you think people are going to go just do anything for no incentives?
The incentive is intrinsic, meaning passion, interest, and honing your skills.
Whether you get paid or not.
Well, the problem is that we're forcing people to,
Just first off, I have to say the incentive, she says historically, the incentive historically has been to work or die. That has been the incentive. You worked because your family needed food. You worked because you didn't have shelter and your family needed the shelter. Historically, for human beings, for 99.9% of the amount of time that human beings have existed, that has been the incentive, is to work sun up to sun down so you didn't starve to death. That has been the historic incentive for people. And these people get up there and they still have an issue with, you still have to work to survive. That is the default of human beings. And it goes to some of the last point as well. The other option is you shouldn't work, but other people should have to work in order to provide you with the things that you need to survive. That's not going to work at all. Those people will decide that they don't need the work either. Whoever it is that's doing the work that provides life necessities for people, they don't need the work either, right? Because they have a right to those necessities as well. Why should they have to work? Why would you choose to go into a field where you have to work to provide people with things? I would never choose to build houses if that were right for people. Anyhow, let's go to a little bit more what she's saying.
Need to, work to survive.
So what's the alternative? So give me another solution, another economical
system. May I finish the talking point?
Yeah, actually, I'm curious.
So the psychological theory of self-determination is widely accepted in psychology and basically explains that intrinsic motivation and passion is actually what predicts incentive. You're arguing that incentive is integral to profit-driven motivation. That's not true. Extrinsic motivation, at all times, at every single case, is going to, predict less creativity, less motivation, less skill, etc. Intrinsic motivation is what causes things like technological development. Some of the greatest breakthroughs have been from people who are devoted in honing their skill.
So should they get paid for it?
I think that we shouldn't live in a system that privately owns the means of production and forces people in this position.
Fortunately, to your claim, results show.
She says it again, that we shouldn't be in a system which I saw another clip of her going around. She's a communist. We shouldn't be in a system that forces people into the situation that is the default. The default is that people have to work to survive. You used to just have to work so you could grow food and so you could build your own shelter and stuff. And we found ways to trade with one another where you don't have to do every single one of those things. You can specialize in one specific thing that you're good at or decent enough at that you can make money and be able to pay other people to do those things for you. That's what you're doing when you buy food. You're paying other people to do those things for you because you're just going to focus on the thing that either you want to do or that you're good at, or that would take you if you're not good at, anything. Specifically, I mean. And so once again, no one ever talks about that default position of human beings. And then she talks a lot about how passion is the incentive factor for people. I want to give her a little bit of credit on this one. I do think that passion for a specific thing is a motivator. I have passion to do this show. I also have passion to make a lot of money. And eventually, those are going to have to coincide with one another. This podcast makes money. This podcast makes enough money for one person to live off of. Unfortunately, there's two people, and one of them makes a stupid amount of money doing other stuff, so whatever. If eventually those two things don't coincide with one another, I'm not going to do it for forever. It takes a lot of time to do this. There's a lot of risk involved with this. You're watching me right now on thousands and thousands of dollars of equipment just all around this room, all over. Charlie got a more expensive house because it has a house-sized basement underneath it that we were able to do a good-sized studio in here that we can finally bring guests into. And And so that passion has driven us to keep doing this because we really care about these topics. But also we have to provide value to people. And by value to people, I mean, we're going to have to get paid enough to live a really, really good lifestyle eventually in the future. Right now, we get paid enough to survive. And that's good. A lot of podcasts don't make it to that point. A lot of shows don't make it to that point. Luckily, we've got people like the Fed Haters Club. We sell some t-shirts. That's providing value to people. They decided they wanted that shirt more than they wanted their money. That's good. People in the Fed Haters Club have decided it was worth them spending this time with us every single day of the week when we want to fork over a little bit of cash for that, and that's awesome. We've got advertisers that have decided it's worth advertising their products on our show. You hear them annoyingly cut in to the show at the beginning or throughout the middle of the episodes, and so we're providing that value for people. And eventually, that value is going to have to be enough for us to live a really, really, really good lifestyle because there are alternative things that could potentially happen. Right now, passion is what's keeping it going. So I do want to say she's got a little bit of a point there, but I'm going to destroy her point here pretty soon.
That the greatest
Results
economical
show that
system
intrinsic
is
motivation predicts more
capitalism
creativity
that allows
and more
people to go
profit
above and
than
beyond
anything
and
like
solve
extrinsic
every
motivation.
single issue out there. An entrepreneur who gets up, who says,
What was your
I'm
claim
gonna
again,
be-
mister?
I'm going to incentive. The
Incentive.
entrepreneur
What about
who has an
incentive?
incentive to go out there and build their lives, and you put
So
no
I'm saying that this
monetary
incentive that you're talking about,
Yeah.
what predicts the best incentive, the best drive, and the best creativity
what do you think about
has
Elon
been proven
Musk?
by
What do you think
psychology.
about-
What we find is that the best incentive comes from intrinsic motivation.
So a person that's passionate about solving an issue is going to build something bigger than somebody else that's not.
Yes, so someone who has a true passion for this.
Yeah, so
Exactly. So profit motivation is not the thing that's driving innovation,
Of
right?
course it is.
Psychology.
Of course
so
it is.
psychology.
And so this is one I really wanted to make a point on as well. She's making the argument that it's not the profit motive that is driving innovation. It's the passion that people have. Okay. Let's say that's the case. Let's back up that argument. Okay, well then it also just so happens to be the case that the place where you have the capability to make massive amounts of profit, unlimited amounts of profit, or unlimited amounts of wealth, that place also ends up with the most new innovations and inventions. Like, why is it that you can't go to the other countries where their passion is why they do things, or go to Denmark or Sweden or the Netherlands or Norway or many places in Europe that you could name? And are the people just not passionate enough? And because they've got a lot more social welfare programs there. They've got their healthcare somewhat taken care of in some of those places. They got really high tax rates, but hey, you don't have to worry about many of those basic necessities of life. And so therefore, you've got more time to pursue your passions. It just seems to be that they're not as passionate there. Why is it the case that in the country where you can make as much profit as you want and you can grow as much wealth as you want also seems to have the most passionate people, apparently? Because quite a lot of very, very important life-changing inventions have come out of this country where we have this capitalist economic system. Now, there's some other very important inventions that came from places like the UK. We'll note that some of those really important ones happened before America was fully up and going. Like inventions like the steam engine and stuff happened I think that invented like in the late 1700s. And we were just passing Tariff acts at that time. And so we weren't really doing much of anything yet at that time. But I don't know, airplane, smartphone, internet. I mean, just go down the list of the light bulb, the telephone, like life-changing inventions for people. And then look at all the other companies I could name. You know, what's an important? Uber is a pretty big company, you know. That's a pretty big one. The amount of Fortune 500 companies, the companies that are creating very useful products for millions to billions of people, well, those things are happening in America. Why is that? Because only America has passionate people? this is the only place where because passion is the number one motivating factor, that this is the only place that people have passion? Or is their passion also an incentive, but it's also incentivized by the fact that they can have their passion and they can make whatever amount of money they can possibly make off of it at the same time? So anyhow, let's listen to a little bit more.
That's not the case. That profit's not the reason that we have the greatest inventions that we do today.
I don't know if I disagree with the fact that there's a passion behind it. Are you saying people with passion, even if there wasn't the incentive to make as much money as they would make, people would still pursue it even with or without money?
That's what psychology says.
Well, your claims are wrong, because
that's not true.
Whoever your psychology professor is.
She says that's what psychology says. Basically, she learned this in class, that there was a study and it said that people are actually driven by passion, and they went through all these people and they were like, well, let's look at Bill Gates, and well, let's look at Elon Musk, and well, let's look at all these other inventors, and what did they have? They had a passion. That's what their number one motivating factor was they cared about creating this because they were such smart geniuses that they wanted to create these things. They also were in a country that incentivized those things and rewarded people who did those things. And why aren't there a huge amount of people from all the other countries around the world who are giving us life-changing technologies? I'm not saying there aren't any. I'm not saying there have never been any in the past. But where are all of those things that you're using on a daily basis, or that makes your life easier, that are coming from those other countries? I'm sure there are some, and you can give me a list of them if you're watching on YouTube or whatever. Post it in the comments. I'll look at what they are.
If you look at data and you find out how America, that's only been around for 249 years, schooled all the other countries that have been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years more, they did better than others because the incentive
because they accumulated
was free market
profit,
capitalism.
right, to 1% of the population and continue to produce on that
not
basis.
Necessarily. It's
right?
not,
we have this. Okay,
it's not necessarily.
Do we want to respond, because you can say that
you've been interrupting the entire time? So if you're saying about the 1% are the problem and they're the only ones that make money, a lot of people make money. You said profit goes to the 1%.
I'm explaining how it is that America has become the dominant power that it is now, right? What we see is that because we have this engine, right, this desire to accumulate profit, we morally justify things like going into other countries, imperializing them, colonizing them, and extracting their resources, right, to funnel our country, right? Social democracies in the Nordic countries don't do this. So yeah, they might not be the wealthiest power, but they have higher rates of education, literacy, human satisfaction, etc. Right? So it depends on what we actually value in a society. Do we value well-being, or do we value profit accumulation?
So she sort of destroys some of her own argument there at the end. She's like, well, yeah, that's because we have the 1% and they can accumulate wealth, and so they've done that in our country. That is what's helping drive a lot of their passion. Some of their passion is to make money as well. And then she talks about some of the Nordic countries. They don't have all this wealth. Why don't they have this wealth? The people aren't passionate, And then she says, well, it depends on what your society determines to be valuable. Well, the guy who creates a thing, whatever the thing might be, doesn't just decide that the thing is valuable, and then he creates it and he puts it up for sale, and then all of a sudden he's got all that money and he's a billionaire. People have to determine that it's valuable. That's the only way that you get the money in the first place. And so society does determine that those things are very valuable. And a bunch of that wealth has accumulated in America because many of those things come from America. And that's what not only people in America have determined to be valuable, it's people around the entire world have determined those things to be very valuable to them. It just so happens a lot of those things were created in America, or they were at least invented in America. The companies that sell them are in America. Why is that? Because we reward people who take risk and who are passionate about creating those things for people. That's actually the end of that clip right there. She talks about colonizing, and this person who's talking right now, it's important to note that they are in fact a commie, like a literal commie. And so, of course, she has the idea that none of these other societies have ever succeeded because America has destroyed all of them. There are no socialist or communist countries, never have been. Man, I thought I had this clip pulled up. I guess I don't anymore. Okay. There are no socialist or communist countries, never have been, can't name any. No one ever did real communism. And then I saw a clip going around earlier, which I'm upset I can't find it right now, where she was talking about how, well, if you read Marx and Engels, basically it's this idea that we would get to the point where, and I think that point is called peak capitalism, where we'd be able to automate and everyone would be able to have everything that they need and everything that they want. And she makes basically that Marxist point that, well, no, you couldn't do it then, but eventually you get to that point and everyone will be able to have everything they need. There will be no more scarcity, which is, it's crazy. I feel like there's scarcity right now, but I think she thinks it's artificial scarcity created by capitalists. And then everyone will be able to have everything. How do you get to that? It's so funny that even the communists, the Marxists, will make the argument that you needed capitalism to get to the point that you would no longer need capitalism. But then they never think about the future. They only think about right now. Is this the best things are ever going to be? I don't think so. So far, we keep getting more and more innovations and more inventions. I know it kind of seems like some of these things are pointless, or maybe AI is going to destroy us, or maybe some of these things aren't actually good for society, and I can agree with some of that. I get that whole thing, but I still think there's going to be more inventions that make our lives ultimately better, infinitely better. And so they say, okay, right now, that's good. Let's stop now. We have determined that this is actually peak civilization, and now it's time to spread out all of this wealth. So first off, on the one hand, they're saying, we don't need to ever get any better than this. We've done enough. This is peak right now. It's time to spread everything out. What if they would have decided that 100 years ago? People were saying this 100 years ago. People were making this argument 100 years ago. What if they would have been correct then, according to them, and they would have said, you know what? 1925, this is it. That's pretty good. Look how much better things are than they were in 1825. I think we've reached the peak. It is time for us to spread out all of this wealth. Look at all the wealth. It's the roaring 20s here in America, and it's time to finally say that we've done enough, and it's time to spread out all of this wealth. Well, look at how much better our society has gotten from 1925 to 2025 with inventions and technologies and stuff like that, things that have been created by our capitalist system over that time. We would not have had any of those things. And so when they do it now, it's tough to see because it's an unseen thing. What is it that we could have had 100 years from now that we don't have right now? We won't get those things. Whatever ways life would have gotten better for everyone. Think about the massive change in quality of life for people from 1925 to 2025. There could also be the same kind of change on the same percentage quality of life scale basis that happens from 2025 to 2125. But it wouldn't happen if you decide that this is it. We've hit the peak. It's time to take all of our chips down. Let's spread them all out. Here we go. The other problem is they don't understand the wealth creation. Like, okay, let's spread out all of this wealth. Let's just, we've made enough. It's time to give it all away. What about like 5 years from now? Or however many years from now? What are you going to do then? You're not incentivizing people to create wealth. Eventually, that's it. And then society just deteriorates from that point forward. Like, you create the peak of society, and it only gets worse from that point forward. So anyhow, those are my thoughts on that 7-minute clip from Patrick Bet-David on Jubilee. I might do another one tomorrow as well, so come over and hang out for that. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. Charlie's not here. It's always tough to do shows on my own, but at least I'm hanging out here with the Faith Haters Club. If you want to hang out with me, and sometimes Charlie too, join gml.com. It's as little as $7 a month. $7 a month. Think about the things that you spend $7 on, maybe even on a daily basis. You could, if you like what I just said for the last hour, if you think it's important for people to hear anything that I just said for the last hour, well, don't you want to keep incentivizing me to do that? Because my incentive right now is money. So go to joingmail.com, pay as little as $7 a month, and come hang out with me in the Fed Haters Club. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. Leave a rating and a review. 5 stars if you love us. Don't do anything if you don't. Go listen to new guy Josh's podcast, Marten's Minute. The most recent episode on his podcast app is the one that I did, talking about how I used to be an alcoholic and now I'm not anymore. And you can get some of the details on my former music career as well. Some stuff I've never talked about. So go to Marten's Minute. Check that out. Anything else? No. Charlie always does the ending of the show. So anyhow, do all the things I just said to do. And if you don't, Charlie doesn't care, but I do. That's me. I'm Nate Thurston. Until then, I don't remember how to end the show. Until then, have a good day and a good morning, Liberty.